my wife gave me the ultimatum.
Uh-oh.
Get sober or you're going to have to find somewhere else.
Message.
Yeah. Listen to your wife.
And she stood by you through all this.
She did. And she has stuck by me when I told her that I was going to go back to school for addiction counseling.
Wow.
She kind of looked at me a little crazy, like I'm insane. You're going to give up this really great manufacturing career that you have to go back to school for something that doesn't pay nearly as much. It's not the decision that I made lightly. That was God working on me.
Amen.
I'm a stubborn person. So it's one of those, he had to get my attention.
Welcome to the show with your host, RJ Montoya.
Hey, what's up, guys? Welcome to Montoya Power Podcast. So today on the show, we have Mike Thompson. How you doing, Mike?
Good.
We're going to get into some stuff, sobriety, testimonials, faith and stuff. So let's get into the podcast. So how you been, Mike? Thanks for being on the show. Really do appreciate that. I know you're a good friend with Brian and Victor, and you have a powerful story yourself. Can you tell the people out there just a little bit about yourself?
All right, so I'm in the older group. I go to school full-time, work part-time. I've got 2 children, 24 and 21.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Both of them at home. So in the middle of a major remodel, so our house is chaotic right now.
Oh, that's tough. It's got to be tough, especially with school and everything.
Yeah, it's been a little bit frustrating.
Okay.
So you can imagine tempers get a little short sometimes.
Hey, especially in Texas, man, you got that heat, so that doesn't help,
Right.
So can you tell us a little bit about your background for those that,
All right. So I did 15 and a half years in the service between the Marine Corps and the Army.
Awesome. Thanks for your service.
Multiple deployments. Came back, developed a pretty good drinking habit, and then went through divorce, met my current and love of my life, and got saved.
Okay.
And then got sober.
There you go.
Because I couldn't get sober without getting saved.
Hey, that's powerful. It's powerful stuff there. So let's backtrack a little bit. So did you join the Army first or the Marine Corps first?
Marine Corps first.
Okay. And how long were you there?
4 years.
Okay. Why did you decide to do the lateral move from the Marines?
Actually, it wasn't a decision on my part.
Okay.
I broke my ankle, and then I re-broke it and had to get screws put in. So no hardware. They let me finish out my enlistment, but said, there's no re-enlistment for you.
Right.
They can be choosy that way.
Absolutely. Marine Corps is a different animal.
It is.
And then you did a lateral to the Army. How was that?
Yeah, I had to wait a little while to move over because of the medical.
Right.
There was a waiting period, so I had to wait. Had to do basic training again, which was interesting.
How long was the wait between?
5 years.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah, I had to wait 5 years.
If it was 6 months after, would you have had to do boot camp again, or is it because it was 5 years?
It was because of the length of time.
Okay, that makes sense.
Yeah, and in fact, I wasn't eligible for the medical waiver
Okay.
in the Army to come back in until I'd been out for 5 years.
Right.
They wanted to make sure that I didn't re-break it or have any problems. So
right. It's a huge investment for sure.
Yeah, plus, life got in the way.
Yeah, I hear that.
Met my first wife, got married, had kids. And so there was a little bit of time consumed in that.
And so were you married when you first joined the military, or
No.
was this afterwards?
No, I was headed down a very dangerous road. The decision to join the Marine Corps was me, my mom, and a judge.
Oh, wow. Okay, that's interesting.
So, yeah.
Let's get into the novel. So what does that look like? What does that mean exactly?
So I got busy hanging out with a rough crowd. Had a couple of charges pending. Well, more than a couple, like 12.
Oh, wow.
And so there was me, a judge, my mom, and a recruiter.
Okay.
So the judge says the recruiter will take me, but, So that's basically how that started.
Does that program still exist?
Oh, no.
No?
No, they've done away with that.
Okay. So when I was deployed, there was a Navy, he was a corpsman, and he was from Cali, and I don't know, him and his buddies, they ended up breaking into some houses when they were teenagers, and then so the judge, there was that system back then where it was just like, hey, jail or join the military. And so he was part of that program. But this is a long time ago, so I guess they did away with that.
Yeah, I think that went away.
Okay.
I know that. So I needed a medical waiver to go back in the military to the Army, but you can't get 2 waivers. So your criminal record can't be one of the waivers that you get.
Right.
So looking back, the Marine Corps, because I did my 4 years, everything disappeared. So there was no need for 2 waivers. So I was actually able to go into the Army.
Gotcha.
With just the medical waiver.
Gotcha. And that was just you being young, being a knucklehead, just learning about life?
That was me being angry and not focused and no guidance.
Okay. Can you tell us a little bit about your upbringing? Like, where did you grow up?
I grew up in Salt Lake City.
Utah?
Yeah, Utah.
Okay.
Single mom, 6 kids.
Wow.
So you can imagine that
Absolutely,
a little bit rough. Not enough of mom to go around.
Right.
So, you try and focus on the people that you hang out with and not start running with a bad crowd. But,
sure.
that when you find a place where you fit in, even if it's a bad place, people do it all the time.
Absolutely. As humans, we always want to be a part of something, whether it's a club or something. And that's why I tell the youth a lot, like, find it's your circle is going to dictate your actions. And a lot
show
of
me your
times.
friends. I'll show you your future.
Absolutely, yes. So, okay, so then let's just jump. You jumped into the Army, and how was that lateral movement for you? I know it had been different for you.
It was different, same, but different.
For sure.
It was one of the best things I ever did.
Okay.
There was, there's things that happen in your life, it gets in the way. And then when you think you get back on track, think you're headed in the right direction, and then, you get derailed.
Right.
So I think that's a little bit what happened with the Army. I actually got a medical separation.
From the Army?
From the Army.
Okay.
Yeah, I did some damage to my back, and I've got some... I got Army knees. So,
yeah, I hear that, man. Who doesn't have a messed up body when you join the military?
I know, right? So... yeah, so
it's just part of the beast. That's all that is.
It is, and when you lose the group of brotherhood that you've been around for a long time, it's really easy to fall into negative mindset.
For sure.
And then, you find that, for me, alcohol was the solution at the time. The VA was no help.
Okay.
And fortunately, they've gotten better.
Absolutely.
Considerably.
So much better, yes.
So, but, I developed, like I said, a serious drinking habit that pretty much consumed a lot of my time. I was able to start a business on my own.
Okay.
I got divorced.
From your first wife.
Yeah. That's a whole nother subject. But, so yeah, I got divorced and I needed custody of the kids because of her situation. So I started my own company and did fairly well. The housing crash of 2008 left a lot of people with houses that they did not want to sell or couldn't because they were upside down. So a remodel and rentals was their option. And so that business was booming.
Absolutely. Wherever there's a tragedy, there's an opportunity.
Right. So that, and as long as it was booming, it was good money.
Right.
And then it wasn't booming anymore.
And then it just dipped back down.
It did back down. So I cut back a lot on that. But then I met my current wife. And funny thing, she told me after about 3 months, she said, you know what? Don't get too comfortable because I'm moving to Texas.
Uh-oh. Wow.
And I just looked at her and I said, give me the option to go with.
Oh, wow. Okay.
And we moved to Texas.
There you go. Wow.
So that's how we wound up here.
So she's a Utah lady herself?
No, she grew up upstate New York and Ohio.
Okay.
Mainly.
Okay, a lot of East Coast. And why Texas? Or why did she decide to come down to Texas?
Her sister lived here.
Okay.
Well, still lives here.
Okay.
So it was where family was.
There you go.
It wasn't Florida and it wasn't the north where her mom and her brother lived. So Texas it was.
Gotcha. So how long have you been a Texan?
We got here in 2016, 2017.
Okay.
So a few years.
Absolutely. Wow. Well, in the great country of Texas. Welcome,
y'all.
Well, that's awesome. Can you tell us a little bit about, because you're sober now. How long have you been sober now?
So a little over 5 years.
Congratulations.
Thank you. I went to the VA and they set me up some counseling with somebody who was like 29 years old. Never actually been active duty.
Right.
So obviously never deployed. Hadn't seen that monster. So it was really difficult. You know, you have to be able to trust a counselor
For sure.
or a therapist. And if you can't trust them, it's really hard. You can't relate. So after a couple of sessions with him, I was like, you know what? No, I don't think this is going to work out.
Right.
So I took the private route through insurance. I went through an organization that's what they do. Their counts their addiction, and they specialize in all sorts of addictions. So
For sure.
drugs, alcoholism, eating, all types. So going into it knowing that they were not combat veterans was actually kind of a benefit.
Okay.
Because I knew they were not going to understand.
Gotcha.
So my approach was going to be different. I was going in as hey, I am civilian Mike.
Gotcha.
And I think that mind shift helped with the counseling. And it was I chose it's called an intensive outpatient program.
Okay.
4 nights a week, 3 hours a night.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah, mandatory AA meetings.
So did you have to literally live there?
No, because of work,
Right.
I couldn't give up the income, so
Gotcha.
I had to go the outpatient process. But there's a I wouldn't say there's a bad success rate in those, but it's not as good as inpatient.
Okay.
But if I would have had to go inpatient, there would have been that would have created more problems.
For sure.
You know,
but
loss
you
of
did have
income.
an alternative.
There was alternatives.
Gotcha.
And everybody was fully supportive.
Okay.
You know, my wife gave me the ultimatum.
Uh-oh.
You know, get sober or you're going to have to find somewhere else.
Message.
Yeah. Listen to your wife.
And she stood by you
She
through
did.
all this.
She did. And she has stuck by me when I told her that I was going to go back to school for addiction counseling.
Wow.
She kind of looked at me a little crazy, like I'm insane. You're going to give up this really great manufacturing career that you have to go back to school for something that doesn't pay nearly as much.
Right. Absolutely.
And,
It's a lot of work.
It
a lot
is.
of people work, people skills.
It is. And one thing I've found that once you make a decision like that, it's not something the decision that I made lightly. That was God working on me.
Amen. Yeah.
I'm a stubborn person. So it's one of those he had to get my attention. And it took some pretty drastic ways for him to get my attention.
Can you describe that a little bit?
Yeah. So growing up in Salt Lake City, I grew up Mormon.
Okay.
So one of the expectations, you get baptized when you're 8 years old. I got baptized because it was expected.
Okay.
Not because I had this firm belief in God and wanted to follow Jesus.
It was ingrained into you as a child.
Right. It's just you're going to turn 8 and you're going to get baptized.
Okay.
It wasn't until I met my wife that I got saved. And it took a long time to realize the difference between being baptized and being saved. But when I was in Iraq, there was we were on a mission in downtown Tikrit, and the first time that he really reached out and got my attention was, I was in a Humvee, and it was at the beginning, and there's not a whole lot of armor on these Humvees when we first got there. Yeah. You're talking some sandbags on the floorboards and some jerry-rig, plate for, up in the turret.
For sure.
So I was in the turret, had my comms on. There was a tank in front of us, Bradley behind us. So just a lot of noise, a lot of noise. And in the loudest whisper, I was told, get down. I don't know why I listened to it then, but I got down. The ID went off, turret disappeared. And, it shook me.
Right.
Like, why me? Why now? What's the message? And one of the things that I really couldn't grasp at the time, and I still have a hard time wrapping my head around it when I think about it, is the intentionality of God. We don't know. We don't understand it.
Right.
He is very intentional. And if you think you're going through a struggle right now, it's because you need to learn something.
Building that character.
Well, the character and, in the counseling line of work, it really helps to have been there. because you can build a rapport and a level of trust that you can't build just through empathy.
Absolutely.
And so when God does that, you listen. So I listened for a little bit. And then after I got out, the drinking, and I wasn't listening anymore.
Right.
So I went through some difficult times, and with the move to Texas was a lifesaver.
Okay.
Because I think if I would have stayed in Columbus, Georgia, I think I would have drowned. Too many familiar places, too many familiar people, all with the wrong attitudes and the wrong lifestyles.
Wow.
So, the move to Texas was a big thing. Finding the church that we go to, another big thing.
Okay.
Getting saved, getting sober. And with each step, I can look back and go, okay, God, I see what you did there.
Right.
I can understand it. We were talking earlier about your GPS in life, your God's positioning system.
I love that. GPS.
In fact, on the way here, I had set in the address into the GPS, and I looked at it, and I said, an hour. Wow, it shouldn't really take an hour to get there. And I'm about 10 minutes out of my house, and I realize I left a setting on avoid highways.
Ah.
And how many times in life do we set our eyes on a destination and then forget to reset our settings?
Wow, that's so good. Yeah, I like that.
It's in business and in life, you have to reevaluate on a regular basis.
Absolutely, self-reflection.
You have to. If you can't do that, then there's the pitfalls that you wind up falling into. Mine was alcoholism.
Okay.
Which is why I decided to get sober and go back to school for addiction counseling.
Wow.
I didn't want that veteran to walk into the VA and not have that person to talk to.
Right. Because you've been there.
Yeah, I was that person. I walked in there. I didn't have anybody to talk to. So it's just one of those, you look back and you go, why? And then you think about it and you say, okay, I see it. You have to really reflect on what happened and not the why it happened, just what happened. And what am I supposed to learn from that?
Absolutely. Do you think that some of that alcoholism was, obviously it was a coping mechanism, but do you feel that it was survivor's guilt? Why me?
So I've been told I have a really, really good way of compartmentalizing loss.
Okay.
My counselor told me that because I don't really spend a whole lot of time with the why me and or why them and not me.
Right.
I don't really have a whole lot of survivor's guilt.
Okay.
I don't know why that is, and I think maybe that's because you experience loss as a child. If you have good coping skills, then they'll carry throughout your life.
There's an acceptance there.
Right. So, giving children the coping skills that they can deal with is one of the most important things we can do as parents.
100%.
They don't know. In manufacturing, we had a saying: so they don't know what they don't know.
Okay.
And you don't know what they don't know.
True.
So don't assume that they're coming to you with the same knowledge that you have. That's a bad assumption.
That is so true. And that's a mistake we do as parents is we think that they're going to be at our level, but they haven't lived our life. And a lot of times we create a life that's unlike the way we grew up. And we expect them, well, I went through this. They should go through the same thing, but it's a totally different world we brought them into. It
is. Our past, our childhood and early life, it doesn't exist anymore.
It doesn't, no.
Technology's gotten in the way. Everybody's so, ingrained with social media, and it has its pluses for sure, but it's also got its drawbacks.
Absolutely. It can
negative
be
self
too.
Aspects. Kids watch it and they see everybody's highlight reel. They don't see the low light reel.
Man, that's good. I like that. There you go.
They don't see it. So, they think everybody's got a perfect life. They don't have arguments with their parents. They don't go through stuff, and so it's a false representation of life.
Yes. And the younger they are, the more influential they are because they think like, I've been seeing this since I'm 6. So this is just how the real world must be. And then they get to the real world and the expectations just shift a little bit.
That's not it. Yeah. That's not exactly what I thought life was going to be like when I got older.
So you're a parent, you're a father.
Yes.
Talk to me a little bit about raising kids. You have a boy and a girl.
I do. Yeah. 24-year-old son and 21-year-old daughter.
Oh, wow. What a blessing.
My daughter and I actually go to the same school.
Okay. Wow.
So we she hasn't ignored me in the hallways yet, but we also I don't think we've seen each other.
There you go.
I haven't seen her, so
I was going to say, do you guys cheat on the test? Like sit behind each other?
Totally different degree plans.
Gotcha.
But yeah, so when I look back on the way I was raised, I can, reflect on how patient my mom was, but how also explosive she could be. And, when I was young, I looked at it as like, she's just angry. And as I've gotten older, I realized she was overwhelmed.
Right.
Six
Absolutely.
kids, single mom. Mm-hmm. We didn't see a whole lot of my dad.
Okay.
So for whatever his reasons were on that, which I think is the reason why lacking that male role model.
Okay.
Is some, the bad crowd, the running with the as my mom would call them, the undesirables.
Hey.
So
yeah.
Raising children it's been different. What I thought it would be like to raise children is nothing like how it is. The self-sacrifice that goes into it, the getting home from work, being just drained.
Right.
And then there's still dinner.
Yes.
There's still homework. Mm-hmm. And then when I became a single father, it was even more responsibility.
For sure.
If I got a call in the middle of the day, say, hey, your daughter's sick at school, she needs to go home. It's like, well, there goes the rest of my day.
Right. You
So
go get her and pick her
it
up,
got
bring her
difficult.
back.
And thankfully it gets easier as they get older.
Yes, it does. Yeah. They sleep longer. No.
I don't know about that. My son is 6 o'clock every morning.
Hey,
No alarm clock.
Okay.
So, you look at it and you go, wow, this is nothing like I thought it would be.
Right.
And when you're ill-equipped, you make mistakes.
Yes. And I'm assuming you appreciate your mother more once you became a parent yourself.
Absolutely. I understood a lot of what, the reasoning behind her decisions. I use a phrase with my kids, don't lie to me. The lie will get you in more trouble than the truth.
True. Yeah.
And
kids are going to make mistakes, but that's good advice right there.
Yeah. And it's true. I'd rather deal with the truth than have to try and decipher what's true in the lie, because there's always partial truths to it.
Yeah.
You don't have to be a code expert to break that one.
Yeah.
But, and I learned the other one, it's easier to turn a no or a no into a yes than a yes into a no.
There you go.
And that stuff has always stuck by me. Everything else, I kind of had to figure that out on my own.
So it sounds like you're very active in your kids' lives. Talk to me a little bit about, why do you think parents today are not as active in their kids' life as they should be? Because it's easy to drop off your kids at daycare or church camp, but why are they not as active? Where are they missing the mark?
So I'm going to kind of equate that to driving nowadays. When you have a child going through, at the turn 16 as they're ready to get their driver's license, you can put them through driving school.
Right.
Or you can do the parent self-taught. So when you have a parent teaching a child how to drive, that child's going to drive just like the parent.
True.
Wow. So when you have somebody else teaching the child how to drive, they learn the rules and the regulations and the way it's supposed to be, not their parents' interpretation of the way it is.
Right.
So
two different influences.
It is. And one of them's correct and one of them's incorrect. And I think that parents don't spend as much time involved in their children's lives, because there was a time period where the mantra was, you need to be friends with your child. Huh. Which is, I think it's a horrible idea.
Absolutely horrible idea.
I don't know that my children would ever say I was their best friend.
Right.
Because
you're not going to always tell them yes. You're not always going to give them what yeah, for sure.
And I will tell you how it is. And if it hurts your feelings, then we'll talk about why your feelings are hurt.
For sure. Tough love. Being honest.
So, and it's the way the world works. You can't go to work and expect that, your boss is going to be your best friend. He is there to tell you, or she is there to tell you what you need to be doing.
Yes.
And hold you accountable for your productivity. Mm-hmm. It's the same thing with parents, except for that got lost.
Do you think society has something to do with that? Because, back in the day, you heard about helicopter parenting and coddling, and you got to love and nourish your kids and all that. But I believe that in the Bible, obviously, discipline is a form of love.
It is.
Free will, the right to choose, but ultimately we'll be there to help walk with them, right? What would you say about society today and what is teaching parents?
Okay. So there's a phrase that I don't remember where I heard from it, that you have the right to choose your consequence.
That's true.
And I think that's where a lot of it got lost. The biblical aspect of spare the rod, spoil the child has been interpreted in different ways. I don't think it's ever lost its accuracy, though.
Right. For sure.
Unfortunately, I think, it got turned into, spanking or physical, actions, and not the, teaching.
Right.
When you tell your kid no, they're just going to hear no. If you tell them no, and then you give them the reasoning behind the no.
For sure.
Then they're going to learn something other than it's just no because mom said no or dad said no.
Because there's a why behind the no.
Yeah. Somebody's going to say yes, though.
Yeah.
So, and that person that says yes is going to give them the affirmation that they're looking for. And that's the direction they're going to want to go. So that's why kids wind up coming from really great homes, at least from the outside looking like really great homes, and they wind up troublemakers running with the wrong crowd.
Right.
They got the affirmation from the crowd, and that's where they went.
And then we water down loving our children by giving them everything they want and thinking, well, I love them, so they need the new toy or they need the new phone or the new car. Well, if I don't get it for them, it's like, I don't know what it is within us as parents or as people where we feel we lose sight of that we're actually hurting them. We want to love them, but giving them everything, we're actually hurting them. Kind of like you said, like when they get a job, their boss doesn't care.
No.
It's like meet the deadline or get fired. You're getting paid to do this.
It's true. I don't know that there's one thing in society where it shifted. I do know that by being friends with your child, you're enabling them to be spoiled.
Right.
And have a different perspective on life. When you ask them to contribute, they look at you like, what are you talking about? Like, well, you're driving now, so you need to contribute.
Right.
It's insurance isn't cheap.
For sure.
But it teaches them, and it may hurt them in the beginning. They may look at it and it's like, wow, I have a job, but I don't really have any money. And you want to look at them and go, yeah, it sucks, doesn't it?
Right.
I have a job too. Yeah, don't have a whole lot of extra cash.
Right. Welcome to the real world.
This is the way it is. Because nobody wants to hear, well, that's just how it is.
Right. I started working when I was 14 so I could help my parents pay the rent, stuff like that. So I've always just understood that there's a different world outside of the world that I'm growing up in. My dad told me once when I was in high school, he said, look, I can get you through high school, but college and all that stuff after that, it's up to you. And I remember thinking as a teenager, I was just like, wait a minute, high school is free, so it's not like you're getting me through it. But he still had to take me and put a roof over my head and all that stuff, right?
Yeah.
But that reality of him telling me, like, this is how the real world works, there's more after this, woke me up faster.
Right.
And I think we do a disservice to our children when we're like, oh, you'll figure it out or you'll be that, rock star. It's just like, you got to work to get to anywhere and earn it.
You do. And when you're working to do that, you have to have the tools.
Yes.
If you don't have,
So
good decision-making tools, you're not able to think for yourself and weigh the pros and the cons and the consequences. That's a huge disservice.
Yes.
When we stopped asking our children, well, what do you think we should do? When we stopped involving them in family discussions about budgeting, kids nowadays couldn't balance a checkbook if you handed it to them.
Right. They're like, what's a checkbook?
Exactly. They don't even know what a check looks like.
They don't. No.
I had to learn the hard way from making a lot of mistakes and paying some overdraft fees and stuff that, this is serious.
Right.
And it's going to hit me in the pocket. And a lot of times, until there's a consequence that affects them directly, they're not even concerned about it.
So true.
It's like, oh, well, that's never going to happen to me. Well, I never was going to become an alcoholic. It wasn't my end game in life.
Right. You didn't wake up and say, I want to ruin my life
no,
for the next few years.
It's a result of not having the coping skills that were necessary at the time.
So as a man of faith now, with that faith that you have that got you through sobriety and all the trials from back in the day, as a Christian father, how has that helped you be a better parent, a better husband?
So getting saved there was a couple of steps in there. My wife, she went to a church in Georgia that was an absolute phenomenal church.
Okay.
When you can go there and after, like 2 or 3 times and after a praise word, song, you're sitting down with tears. That's an effect
for sure
that, is real.
It's very spiritual.
It is. And it wakes you up.
Mm-hmm.
So one of the things that was also fantastic is that my children love to go to church.
Okay. I love that.
And my wife, she is a rock star. She said, you know what, you don't have to go, but I'm going to.
Hey, yeah.
And so
take the initiative.
Yeah. And so going through a couple classes, they call them starting point.
Okay.
For people who are new or,
new to the faith.
Finding their faith again.
Mm-hmm.
There's a percentage, and I don't remember exactly what it is, of how many children come to know God and have faith based on who brought them to church. If the mom brings them to church, then there's a certain percentage. But if the dad brings them to church, the percentage is much higher.
That's so interesting. I've heard something similar to that.
Yeah. So it's one of those. I couldn't be more fortunate that my children like to go to church.
Right.
They're actively involved in church. My son, he's part of the media team with the cameras and stuff. My
media
daughter,
team.
Yeah. My daughter, she's one of the, I'm not going to call it lead people at the food pantry, but she's there every Sunday.
Okay.
So they've gotten involved, but they really got involved. They volunteer. So I couldn't be more happy about that.
That's a blessing to have a family that's serving in the church, and it sounds like all of you guys are leaders. How does one get to that point?
Oh, good Lord. How does one get to that point? I think a lot of it has to do with your introspection on what's happened in your life. Why did I survive an IED blast? Why did I have to become an alcoholic? When you can look at that and go, there's somebody else's hand in there.
Wow. Yeah.
Then that's a big step. When you're not looking for it, you're not going to find it.
Takes a lot of humility.
Usually it takes somebody else. It takes somebody else to grab you and say, hey, let's go do this. Which is why it's so important for men to make sure that their children, they lead by example. Right. You can't expect your kids to have faith and be active in church if you're not going.
For sure.
You have to lead by example. You have to set the standard. So, in the military, we have the saying, don't ever ask somebody to do something you can't or are unwilling to do.
Absolutely.
It's the same thing with faith. If you can't, then you can't ask somebody to do it.
So true.
You're
preaching over here.
Yeah, you can put them in a position where somebody else asks them. Mm-hmm. But it's not as successful.
Absolutely.
So I think that being a father and being a Christian, I don't really think you can consider yourself to be. This is gonna maybe hurt a few feelings, but I don't think you consider yourself to be a true Christian if you were not leading your family.
Wow. And I agree because our family is our first ministry. We can't be out there at church and saying all these things, but when we come home, there's nothing there. We have to, for lack of better words, practice what we preach.
Oh,
you know,
absolutely.
We're not preachers, we're not pastors, but we're disciples, and we should disciple, and our family should get that discipleship first. So
yeah, and I think that once you've established that the family mentality, it's really easy to take that mentality and then shift it to the people around you.
yes,
I'm a member of this men's breakfast group at our church.
Love it.
For Saturday of every month. Right now we're going over Willie Robertson from Duck Dynasty.
okay, yeah,
The Gospeller.
yes.
How do you?
He has a great movie too about his life.
Right. Yeah. So how do you talk to people about God? A lot of people are nervous about it.
Yeah,
A lot of people. One thing that keeps coming up over and over in that and stuff I've been reading is it's not your job to convert them.
man.
You
yes.
need to plant the seed.
Absolutely.
Let God do the watering and the growing.
Because ultimately God doesn't need us. You know, where there's a disciple, he's going to do the work.
Yeah, and so for a long time, I had a hard time talking to people about my faith because I thought, I don't have one of those drastic stories, or, I'm not a celebrity. I don't have influence. And then I realized after the first few times that I told my story about surviving the IED blast,
Right.
that was my story, and that's how I could do it. Because people like to hear stuff, and they like to hear stuff that's interesting.
Right.
If it's boring, you lose track. You lose your focus on it.
Right.
But when you tell a story about surviving an IED blast in a hostile environment, and the reason why you did is because the first time in 20-something years you listened to God.
Wow.
It leaves an impression, and they will start thinking, I wonder if that's God talking to me.
Right.
Because we do have a tendency to look at life, and we overthink stuff. We do. We have a lot of stuff that goes on in our heads. And sometimes I question it. Is that me thinking? Is that my, a little grandiosity from me?
Yeah.
Or is that God talking to me? And sometimes the discernment that is needed, sometimes it's not there, but discernment is like any other skill.
Yes.
You have to exercise it. You have to hone in on it. You can't get good at it if you don't start.
For sure.
So I think, and that's one of the problems that most people have when it comes to sharing their faith, is that they're not sure how it's going to be received. When in reality, you're not going to see how it's received.
That's true. You can't see the analytics on how it affects someone truly.
Well, and you might not be around that person in 3 days when it hits them.
Absolutely. And I love that because you're absolutely right. I was talking to my wife the other day about, she said she doesn't know how I just post online about Christianity and stuff. And, does it ever bother me when people comment and say negative things, this, that? And I'm like, no, because I developed a tough skin, but it's not just a tough skin. My faith has shown me, God has shown his faith in my life multiple times, that there's no way that I could deny him. So if someone comes at me negatively, they lack knowledge in the Bible. They don't read the Bible. They're just being kids. They're just being idiotic. It's not going to shake my faith because I'm online trying to help others and help them find God. Like you said, plant the seeds. And what I tell people, if they lack knowledge in the Bible, but they do believe in Christ, or, they're looking for faith, I always say, this is what you say. You say, hey, I don't have all the answers, but why don't you come to church on me on Sunday? We'll find out together.
That's a great way of doing it. I've had some of the comments, the negative comments, and before I respond, I usually try and ask myself, where is this person coming from?
Right.
If I can't answer it, then I don't answer. Because I don't know where they're coming from.
Absolutely.
I don't know if they're coming from, they've been hurt in a church before. I don't know where they're coming from. So, like you said, you throw the invitation out. It's like, I don't have the answers. Let's go find them together. There's, I have a Bible. It's called The Rooted, and it has the myths and facts.
Okay.
Thrown in different areas of the Bible. And in the back, there's an index of, subject matter that it covers. And it'll tell you the Bible passage that you can go to find out the answer. which I think is fantastic.
Oh, yeah. What's the name of the book again?
It's called Rooted.
Rooted.
Yeah, it's a Bible.
Okay.
And it just has these myths and facts
Okay.
that are put in there, and it covers pretty much everything. So I've bought a couple of those and handed them to people,
Right.
because they've made a comment, and I'm like, I don't think that's accurate. I don't remember that. And so I was like, you know what? If you want to dispel some of these facts, here you go.
Right.
I think that as Christians and as followers of Christ, if we read the Bible and we go by what's in it, we're going to have the guideline that's needed to talk to people about our faiths.
Absolutely.
There's other stuff out there, several books that have helped me. How to talk to your wife. It's a great book.
Yeah.
It's leading through godly communication.
For sure.
And so I realize that, when I say stuff, it doesn't sound rough or, aggressive, but I set it into my phone and then played it back. I'm like, okay, yeah, now I know exactly what she said. Yeah, right. I know why she reacted that way. That's not in the Bible.
Right.
They didn't have the technology back then to do that. But
so true.
It's just, if it's in the Bible, it's a step.
100%.
And it's a truth.
Yes.
And you don't have to just rely on the Bible. There's lots of Christian men out there that have written books that can help you along the way, which is not throwing, say religion or the Bible at somebody. You can just say, hey, this is a really good book.
Right.
I think you should read it. In fact, I'll buy you a copy. Mm-hmm. You're familiar with military coins, right?
Yes.
We've pretty much all gotten. So I keep my sobriety chip.
Okay.
And then I also keep a Armor of God coin.
Love it.
And I keep an extra. So when I run into somebody who I think needs that little nudge or needs a constant reminder of who they are,
for sure,
I'll give them the coin. With the young men in the church, if I see someone who's struggling, maybe with a decision they need to make, or maybe headed the wrong direction, parents may have made a comment, I'll slip them a coin.
Right.
I gave one away the other day. He's getting ready to go to college.
Okay.
I told him, put this in your pocket. When you start to think you might be headed in the wrong direction, put your hand in your pocket.
Right.
It's going to be there to remind you who you are.
That's a great reminder. Absolutely.
And it's a tradition, that in the military, nobody's more proud to get a coin from their commander.
Yeah. Sure.
So, and the higher the rank, the more prestigious the coin.
And we collect those.
We do. And so I took that and transitioned it to, how do you affect young men? They're going to look at it like, wow.
Right.
Didn't see that one coming.
I love that, because you're showing a lot of mentorship, and then you're using your own God-given experiences to relate to others who maybe other people wouldn't relate to. We thought about making some coins for this veterans group at my church, and it's very similar to what you're saying. And I love that, because you're right. Even with books, we can reach out to other people where it's not just throwing scripture at them, but there's other ways to engage with them so that they can get to the point where they're ready to engage with the spirituality part. But you got to open the door first, meet them where they're at.
Yeah, my grandpa used to call it, you got to plow before you plant.
Hey, there you go. Wow, that's a good one.
You got to get the soil ready. And sometimes when, people have talked about, when you mention faith and religion, they're not ready. No, they're in a place where they're so not ready that it actually shuts them down.
Yep.
So,
because they want an answer now.
And chances are they're not going to like the answer they get now.
Yeah.
So you have to do a little bit of soil preparation.
Yep. I love that.
So it's just one of the things that as men in the church we can do. We are the defenders of our families and our faith.
Yes, sir.
And we have to be ready to step in and engage in a productive way. Mm-hmm. And the skills to engage productively, you have to find them.
Yes.
They're not just going to find you. Go to your men's breakfast, go to your men's group, Iron sharpens iron, but the grinding stone hones it.
Absolutely. I
So,
love that.
if you're with men and iron sharpening iron, who do you need to go to hone it?
I love that. Yeah. You're creating other steps that I never even thought about. Like we plant seeds, you say you got to plow first. I love it.
Yeah. Well, and you have to refine it later.
Yes.
So,
Wow.
the last thing that grows on a tree is the fruit.
Wow. No one thinks about the trunk or the roots.
Or how long it takes.
Yeah, the watering. Wow, that's awesome.
It takes a while.
That's what a picture that is.
And it takes intentionality in the way that God has intentionality. You have to be focused on, am I representing my faith the way I should be? I love wearing T-shirts that I have a friend of mine that started. It's called Storm Strategic Treatment Outreach or Options Ministry. Strategic Treatment Options Recovery Ministry, and we get a whole bunch of T-shirts. It says "Send me," and then it'll have something on the back. And before I say something when I'm out in public, I have to remember what shirt I'm wearing, which is why I wear them a lot.
Right.
Because the military mouth has been known to come out.
Uh-oh.
Yeah.
Took me a while to fix mine, but, I got there.
Mine still comes out occasionally. But we have to be intentional about how we act, what we represent, and how we come across. We can't come across as, aggressive, overbearing men in a faith. There's that nurturing part that has to be there.
For sure.
I was talking with a friend of mine who does biology, and he said, "Do you ever wonder why men have estrogen and testosterone, but testosterone is higher?" Because men have to lead by faith.
Man.
And then men have to be strong, and the testosterone gets them there.
Wow.
But the estrogen is there because they still have to be nurturing.
Absolutely, yeah. We're all made in God's image.
More one than the other.
I love that. I've never thought about it that way, but you're right. And I tell men all the time, especially young married men, it's just like at the end of the day, like, she can take out the trash, but I mean, you probably should be doing it,
Yeah, that could be a whole hour in itself. Men have responsibilities, and we need to get back to taking care of those responsibilities.
Amen.
And we need to help other men get back to taking care of the responsibilities, and from a biblical aspect.
Sure.
Because there's nothing wrong in the Bible. So I firmly believe that by reading it, we strengthen ourselves, and by strengthening ourselves, we strengthen our families.
Absolutely.
And then we strengthen our communities, and then we can strengthen our world.
Yes.
But weak men don't strengthen anything.
Listen. So true. So as we wrap it up here, what are some final words or tips that you want to leave for men, for people dealing with alcoholism? What's something that you would tell them, faith-based, and just to motivate them?
Don't fall into the trap of poor, pitiful me. There's an intentionality behind what you're going through. God already knows where you're going to wind up. He knows that you have a choice. You can choose to do it the easy way or the hard way.
Right.
I was always choosing the hard way. And that you need to lean on the people in your life that set positive examples and are what you want to become. And you have to be vulnerable in doing that.
Wow.
You can't become that person without admitting your faults.
True.
I couldn't admit that I was an alcoholic until my wife told me you're an alcoholic, and a counselor told me I'm an alcoholic. Then you're like, oh, well, I guess I'm an alcoholic. And then I learned the damage that I had caused, and it took a long time to start repairing it. So as a man and a Christian and a faith, I think that the best thing you can do is get involved with the other men that are maintaining that level.
For sure.
They say that if you're the smartest person in the room, you're in the wrong room.
Yeah, that's so true.
So it's the same with faith. You need to put yourself around people at or above where you're at in your faith.
Wow.
So, and if you ever question it, well, you already know the answer.
Right.
Because sometimes people don't want to put the effort in because it's hard. You know, life's hard. Choose your hard.
Man, I love that. And you've given so many great examples of choosing your heart and taking initiative and being surrounded by godly people. It sounds like you have a godly marriage yourself, and you're a godly man and father. Thank you so much for being on the podcast, Mike. We would love to have you more. I'm sure there's more episodes we can talk about marriage and so many different things. But I appreciate you being on the show, and thanks for taking the time, and thanks for being a blessing to others.
All right. Yeah. Thanks for having me.
Yeah. So you guys check out Montoya Power Podcast. We'll have Mike back on. I think there's more topics we can discuss and decipher together. But like and subscribe and share this as someone struggling with any type of addiction or who's just looking for faith. Now get out of here.